how do you think, as a person, as a content creator who does a lot of public discourse, right? You talk to people, to regular people, or make stuff for them. How have you found, like, unfortunately, Donald Trump was very effective at getting support, even if it was for blaming things, kicking down, blaming people that were more vulnerable. What do you think the left can do? You were talking about this a little bit with Bernie Sanders, with maybe some of the messaging that might work, when you were talking about why Bernie Sanders doesn't get the same following that, say, Donald Trump got. But yeah, what have you found in terms of messaging that works or doesn't work for actually helping people understand the issues, and then trying to move towards something that might be actually effective in dealing with some of these fundamental issues, say like economic inequality?
Yeah, really good question. I think one that doesn't have it hasn't had an answer for a while, but there is the closest thing I've had to hope in an answer is kind of on the horizon right now. So, first of all, like, I think that we might be under. I first of all think that in many ways, just getting out of these messages way would have done well. Like, if Bernie Sanders had not seen his candidacy get actively murdered by the Democratic Party, I think that could have resonated a lot more with the American people and could have tipped the balance. Like, I think that, like, a lot of people, like, I even think about, even though, this man is probably like one of the dumbest human beings to have a platform, but like Joe Rogan had like was like a sort of like I think he speaks for a lot more of like what like a certain class of Americans think, with like the idea of like, yeah, like Bernie Sanders, and then they fucked him over, so I'm going with Trump. And like that, it's a thing that doesn't make sense if you're like, an overeducated, coastal elite or whatever. But for a lot of people, like Bernie Sanders, like he said, I don't know if this is true now, but for years and years and years, he was consistently pulled as the most popular politician in Congress. And like, that still stuck. But it did seem like that it wasn't enough to break through the Democratic Party's institutions. And the thing is, and this is the way that I think I really need to think, is like, you can't really, kind of like with like the study of capitalism, like you can't, there's no point in crying foul, right? Like, because this isn't a game. And so even if things aren't fair, you have to find a way to win, even if things aren't fair. That's just a fact. And so, honestly, I think that one of the most significant things that has happened this year to show what the future of politics, especially for the left, will be, is the New York City mayoral primary that happened earlier this year, like last month, I think, where a candidate that was a serial sexual harasser but had like, there was somebody who was completely hated, but had full institutional support, had like literally outspent every other candidate combined, and had like used like every single dirty Democratic trick in the book to try and win, lost to a like Democratic socialist who's younger than I am, who has a Muslim sounding name. And the reason is both because I think that the second Trump election has really made a lot of people, like, I think that there is like a now kind of growing disconnect. Basically, a lot of liberals are figuring out the things that the socialists were trying to tell them like 8 years ago. But on top of that, so I'm kind of dancing around, but the person is Zohran Mamdani. And he has the mayoral election coming up, I think, this fall. But him winning that Democratic primary is enough to say what it is, which is just like, he campaigned on, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could campaign on things like things that would make your life better? And the thing is that a lot of like and I want to just like preface everything in this conversation is just in the American context, because that's what I'm an expert in American history and American cultural studies, so I can speak to the best. But like, I do think that this kind of thing could translate outside of the United States as well to different degrees. But like, he ran on, hey, let's fix your cost of living crisis. Let's make your, like, you know, the government actually can do things to make your life better. And in the past, that would be written off as either idealistic and naive, or it would have been just completely annihilated. Like, they were all ready to kill Mamdani's campaign because he was insufficiently loyal to Israel for the mayor of fucking New York City. And that was an absolutely insane thing to do, but I think that in the past that would have worked. But now they tried it and it didn't work. A lot of their typical techniques have been kind of shown for the absolute not like for the like deflections that they actually are. And if Mamdani does anything, is that it's a sign of like what a future of left-wing politics could be like, because the sort of third way liberal centrist like platforming of like the sort of 1990s, like the sort of like the Bill Clinton generation, because of how the Democratic Party politics works, those same people who like almost 40 years ago were dictating policy are still in charge. Like, the party's run by Nancy Pelosi, a woman who's in her 80s, and like Chuck Schumer, who's also, I think, in his 80s, and like the last president to run was also in his like 80s, and like, so like all those people, like, you know, they were people who came into power during the 1990s, and they were like, you know, the people who brought in like this like abandonment of labor. And now, and if this younger generation of new politicians can sort of upend their seats of power, like if, say, some of the rumblings about, I think in 2028, I want to say, there's like talk of like Ocasio-Cortez making a run for Chuck Schumer's Senate seat, or something like a new speaker or minority speaker, depending upon how the next midterms go, to replace Nancy Pelosi, or like any of those things. Like, there are some candidates like Mamdani, but also I think of like in Illinois, there's a candidate by the name of Kat Abulazela, I think is her full name. And she's also like kind of like doing the exact same thing that Mamdani's doing. I think that if more people do that kind of stuff, like that is like again, these are ideas that have been polling for years to be like overwhelmingly popular ideas. You just have to actually, like, a lot of times the Democratic Party would act as if it was some kind of insult, like as if it was like as if it was like an affront to their dignity to have to campaign on doing things to improve people's lives. And the people are realizing that actually, if you campaign, you know, like Trump did it by just lying. He just said, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that, and vote for me. And then they did. But if you like back it up with like actual policies of like, hey, we're going to like, you know, put in this program, we're going to do this program and all that, like, that is a thing that is really popular and people vote for. And I think that if there's a path forward for like overall left-wing politics, it's going to be like kind of like Mamdani style politics. For content creators, like, my whole thing, my goal has always been to be a teacher, because I do think that a lot of the issues of, like, if there's a major issue that the left wing has, and I'm not going to, and this isn't going to be like it got too woke or it got too IDPol or whatever. The real problem that the left has is that it has a uphill battle against a Western culture that has been spent decades steeped in anti-left propaganda. So there's a lot of lies about left-wing positions that need to be addressed. But two, just a lack of education about these topics. Not that people like, you know, I mean, I don't want to get into like this isn't to like talk down to people, but what it is to say is that left-wing politics since about the 1960s, because of the active attempt to get the left out of mainstream politics, has been secluded to people like me, overeducated, you know, pencil heads or whatever you want to call it, right? People who have way too many letters after the name, people who go to fancy schools and live on the, like, it's become kind of an elitist thing because it got segmented into basically like the student activist movement. But what you need if you want to build a like left-wing movement is you need to have a working class left-wing movement, which means that you have to have left-wing ideas like making people's lives better, and but you have to have them make sense to like the average person who doesn't have has a life and doesn't want to read Capital volumes 1, 2, and 3 in order to understand how the world works. And on top of that, realize that this doesn't have to be like an overly academic thing. It's a real left-wing politics is meat and potatoes and like literally meat and potatoes and like rent and electricity and stuff, because it's based in materialism and things as how they are rather than like a sort of ideal idea of how things should be. And so I think that there's something very compelling in that. No nonsense about it if you actually do it. But my whole goal has been always to democratize a political education and to understand the world as it actually is in ways that are entertaining, hopefully, and interesting, and give people the sort of tools that they have to either develop their own ideas or to engage in political conversations that are less about talking about superstructure and base, or talking about historical materialism, and instead talking about man, doesn't it suck that if you're renting a place, there's just like a dude who makes money from takes a lot of your money and does nothing? Doesn't that suck? That kind of stuff.
What I definitely agree with what you're saying about maybe looking to him for success and looking to him for, or looking at how to speak to lower class people to talk about, okay, this is what we need to do to make your life better. What do you think that might look like? I mean, the two examples my mind goes to, you already gave one, which is the mayor candidate. Maybe the other example might be FDR, because of course he was a major person that got a very big following by, and maybe, maybe on the one end you kind of want to return to the New Deal, maybe, but maybe the New Deal is not really the best way to do it now. Yeah, what are your thoughts? What kind of things do you think would be the right things in your experience to talk about, to be this is what to kind of win over people who are, we'll say working class people, or really service sector people too, who are looking at their life prospects get worse. Looking at inflation, looking at the cost of things, looking at their wages and saying, I'm less able to do stuff now, I'm stuck, or whatever, the various issues that they see.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would say is that the service sector and the working class are the same thing. The thing is, America is a service economy, and so its working class is not factory workers as much as it is when people say that we're losing the working class vote, the white steel workers, and it's no, man, the working class vote is the barista with the purple hair. That is, or the Hispanic taxi driver, that is the working class. Right. But anyways, that's a sense of fact.
It just for the record, that's exactly what I was kind of hinting at. I think a lot of politicians, when they focus on quote unquote the working class, they focus on manufacturing jobs, despite the fact that the service sector is, those technically do exist still in the U.S., but the service sector is the vast majority of the working class. Yeah, but keep going. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, which again, kind of in that vein too, when Trump was talking about bringing back industrial jobs, and even I think this is one of the things I think Bernie missed the mark on when talking about bringing back manufacturing. It's what people don't want is manufacturing. Manufacturing is not good work. The reason why we have a service economy is because, and why so many people got educated, is because many parents who destroyed their bodies doing industrial work fought like hell to get their kids an education so that their kids would be safe in an office not wrecking their limbs and like really doing the backbreaking labor that industrialization does. Like in the ideal world, if we had like the robots to do it, no one would do manufacturing work because it is terrible work. It is dangerous. It is uncomfortable, and it destroys the bodies of people who do it. But either way, that is beside the fact. The thing that we need is like I think that there's something emblematic in what you said, and I don't want you to take this as a criticism, but I think that it's a very telling thing because I had this as well, and that is like you're talking like how do we talk to people about these ideas to get them on board? And what I think is that the idea is that it can't be like we can't think of it like we have the ideas that we need to like properly convey. It's just like there's this really great. I think that Americans, especially, but like everybody, but especially Americans, don't like, or they get very on edge when like they feel like they're being talked down to. And I think that like the big thing is not even that. Like it's like I make educational videos because they're out on the internet. You can choose to watch them. You can choose to not watch them. I hope to make them entertaining because I think that everybody is naturally curious and that everybody, if given the opportunity, can watch a YouTube video and have a good time and learn something and feel good about learning something. And honestly, I think that the way to have a proper like left-wing movement is not to properly convey all of these ideas, but to have these people engage and like basically give them the access that they have been deprived to these ideas so that they can build the movement themselves. Mm-hmm. Like the working class people, we need to like, I'm trying to find a way so that somebody who puts in a like 12-hour shift comes home and is exhausted and is not going to fucking crack open a book, is not going to crack open like mutual aid to ponder over an essay in their like, 3 hours they have between when they get home and when they crash. And I want to make something that will make it so that they can get this like, wealth of information about how the world works that they have been deprived of. And there's been active works to deprive them of this information and give it to them, because when they do, they'll realize why things are as bad as they are. And it's not just because that's the way the world works or because, of personal failings, but it's because there's literally a very small group of people who have made it their business to make sure that you are not made aware of these things. And that is and it's because they have all of the structures of the economy are designed to serve them. And that sounds more conspiratorial than it actually is. It's kind of more like a force of nature. Like we live in an economy where private institutions made up of multiple people with levels of bureaucracy and everything like that are designed with the purpose of maximizing profit. And in doing so, like how water will get into all the cracks in stone to break it, they will find every possible way to maximize profits by either reducing costs or raising profit margins, which means like prison labor, which means like racism and sexism and homophobia in order to create classes that can be exploited even more, because that no matter what laws and stuff you put in place, laws can also be influenced. And so like it's just like sort of like it's like almost like a gravity. It's the way that the economy's fundamental function processes. And until the economy doesn't work like that, we're always going to be fighting this thing. That's just the way it works. It's almost like a force of nature. So like I'm not even gonna be like the world would be better if we just like took Elon Musk and Warren Buffett and like Mark Zuckerberg, and we just stripped them of all of their assets and distributed them amongst everybody, because we would just recreate the same system over again. It would just be somebody else down the line, because that's just the way this economic system goes. It always drifts towards this sort of point of crisis. You can reset the clock, but it's sort of like, at the end of the day, it's a device that I also came from a background in like cybernetics and technology history. It is
which is amazing.
System.
I do a lot with cybernetics too. Keep going.
Lovely. Yeah. So it's like capitalism is a cybernetic system of people and institutions and ideas and processes that is designed to do this one thing, and there's no amount of regulation that it can't just figure out how to get around. And there's no, kind of like when we're talking about today with like AI alignment stuff, like we're kind of like thinking like, how do we find all these ways to get this machine that can solve any problem to make things that it can't fix? Like, how do we make a machine, like, how can we get a machine to do the thing we want it to do when it is designed to do something else? And it's like that's the sort of I had like a friend who was like a liberal undergrad that I talked with this once. It was like, it's like us trying to regulate capitalism and make it better is almost like trying to take a drilling machine and teach it how to fly. And people are like, well, if you take the engine and you put a propeller on it and you attach wings to it, it will work. Like, it could fly for a little bit, but it's like, yeah, but it's not going to work really well. It's going to crash and it's going to start drilling because that's what drills are for. When like you could just build an airplane, which is a completely different type of machine, but it will do the thing that you actually want it to do. So that's the whole thing to say that communism is good. And the other part too is that is more, in line with the actual thing that you asked me instead of just me ranting, was that I think that like these are the things that I just want people to know about, and I don't want to. I think that I do so because I don't think you should have to pay $20,000-$30,000 to have a basic education in how the world works. I think that people have been deprived of this education, and that if they knew about how the world actually worked, they would think politically very different than they do today.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I absolutely see what you're saying. So, maybe one quick thing on the criticism you said. For me, it makes total sense. The way I was phrasing it implicitly separated, and you're exactly right. It implicitly separated me from the people who are experiencing the hardship, which is, one, not true. Capitalism affects all of us, but also, more importantly, I think that's emblematic of how a lot of the conversation goes. Kind of like what you're hinting at the end, that people get that there's this kind of separation, and and that relates to like the differences in education and stuff like this. I see a huge advantage.
I don't want to like call you out on that too, because that is a mentality that even I get stuck in. And everybody who is overeducated, like everyone who's educated, everyone who does this ends up in this kind of situation. And I think that it is because we have we were both born in the 80s, right? So like we grew up entirely in a world where like the people who are talking about these kinds of things are in these like isolated, educated spaces. When like for example, when you're talking about like FDR and how he put in the New Deal and how that got its like widespread support, well, that's because he came about in a day where like these kinds of ideas were actually being talked about on like factory floors by like regular people.
Right.
Like, so like the problem is that aspect has been stolen from those people. Those people have been robbed of the sort of intellectual discourse that they would engage with, that they would be able to build movements off of, because they know that giving people that kind of education is dangerous to the way things are.
Right. This makes total sense. And one quick side, but I was born in the year 1990. So I am 1 year from being born in the 80s. So, oh man, totally different there. But yes, yeah, exactly what you're saying makes total sense. I think one advantage, and you mentioned this, but one huge advantage to content creation is that, or being a content creator, is that you don't have to talk about alternatives. You don't have to talk. So like, I think one problem that I'll see politicians fall into, say X politician is running for office, and like you can say, these are big problems. Isn't this frustrating? And they might say, yeah, these are big problems. Isn't this frustrating? Inequality, inflation, yada, yada, yada. But then they almost feel compelled to then say, But now here is my 5 point plan that's going to solve these problems. And then suddenly that creates this, now they have to advocate that plan. And that can create this sense that can, I think, lead to a bit of a, now I have the idea, that can lead to this sense of one form of that superiority that we're talking about that now separates them from, that creates a them, that the politician is now separate and saying this, my idea is the right idea. Whereas I think with content creation, you have more ability to sit with people and say, here's the frustration, let's talk about this together and let the plan come about. And that to me just fundamentally seems like a healthier way to approach it. I think politicians should approach it that way. They often get kind of sucked into approaching it the other way. But like, because it's a bit more of a, this is frustrating, I share in the frustration, and we're all in this together, and it involves more of a listening to figure out what the solution is and staying in that ambiguity longer, rather than having to say, here's a solution, and then coming up with something that is usually not really a perfect solution. It usually amounts to trying to continue to give more gasoline, into the oil rig. Sorry, I messed up that metaphor. To put more gasoline into the drill to keep it flying longer. I think I'm using your metaphor right, but like, it's like to continue it to try to keep it in the air a little longer. And it's like I think your style leads to a more effective holistic solution. Or what do you think? I mean, maybe after doing it for so long, you're like, there's whole other sets of problems, and it's annoying in other ways, and what I just said is incredibly naive.
No, I do think that as I actually do, like, I'm under the I think that there's a lot of different solutions to problems that are local to the places that they're in. Like, for example, right. I don't think that Zohran Mamdani's his proposed things for New York are necessarily what Sheboygan is going to need to fix their problems. But on top of that, I do there is something useful in showing what kind of models work and what kind of ideas are even possible. Because for example, my partner worked in the government for a long time, and under a liberal government was still being pushed all the solutions that you do have to have public-private partnerships. They have to be market-based solutions. And that is the driving ideology of the state, which means that when people kind of get into institutions, they then are they'll kind of come under the impression that the ideas, the solutions that conform to the ruling neoliberal ideology are the ones that are that's just they'll kind of position it as that's the sensible solution, that's the grown-up solution. There's a lot of this where the person who I despise this man with all of my heart, Ezra Klein, who kind of tries to position these problems are too complicated for you average people to understand. And that's why we need these really complicated solutions that are very market-based and all these things. And you don't have, you as as an average person has no input on this, because I'm the smarty pants who made Fox News that literally has the tagline explaining the news as if you are a baby that needs to be spoon-fed ideas. And I do think that there's a much stronger way to approach this, which is, we all do suffer from the same problems, and getting people right and pissed about that is a good idea, because right now, we need to be doing a lot of destroying of these power structures in order to put in new ones, if we even want to attempt things. But on top of that, we have we do have ideas for proposed solutions, but it's not necessary that they're all going to work. We need to experiment. And the thing is that we have been so limited in what kind of tools we can use to fix different problems for decades, that we haven't even realized that there are tons of solutions that exist that we were almost ideologically incapable of even engaging with. For example, I keep going back to Mamdani, but I'm just like wowed by one of his proposals is to make, and if you live in New York, you could probably think it's like a big deal, but like government run grocery stores that would be like price setting, right? Like that would be like able to like, like because they're under the government, they don't have to like, they can do things like put a grocery store right in the middle of a food desert. They can make it so that like, nutritionally like viable foods will just be there. And like in like, in like neighborhoods that where the only grocery store is a bodega. And like, because I lived in Toronto, so we had a little bit of this kind of problem too. But like but like what like that proposed solution would have been completely unthinkable by any politician who's like mainstream today, because the only thing that they could possibly do would be to give it so that a business would have an incentive tax break and maybe a little bit of a subsidy if they built in a disadvantaged area, which would mean that like you'd be paying companies to run at a loss when they could just not go there and go somewhere more profitable because they're just profit maximizing seeking behaviors. And so like even just opening up like the possible range of solutions that exist, and on top of just like areas to explore, would be a big deal. So yeah, like but again, like I think we're still at the point of the argument of just getting people on board with agreeing that there is a problem and that the problem is the same problem that we're all thinking.
Yeah, yeah, this makes total sense. I have found that that good solutions are explainable to everyone. People can understand good solutions. If your solution is too technical that you need to say, you're not going to get it, but this is what they say. Or I as an expert say this, or the experts I talked to said this, one or the other. Well, you're the expert or you're citing some third party that's the expert. If you have to do that to justify your solution, you have usually one of two problems. You're not being creative and effective in how you're communicating, because you don't actually need to do that. You can communicate to them in their world really effectively, and you're just not doing it well. Or if it actually is a situation where you can't, it's because it's probably not a good solution. And one weird example of that, this is like a totally different like scope and aspect of life, but like I've been a data scientist for many years, and so like I built machine learning models, and these things are very technical. Like if I wanted to, so machine learning is really cool. The math of it gets a little bit complicated. I find it fascinating. Any viewer, you should look into this stuff. It is really cool, but it can get technical. But like when I'm presenting, so someone say I'm building a machine learning model as like a research project to try to understand something. Someone comes to me and they say, we have this problem. We want to learn about this. And if I'm building a model to help understand that, if the model is effective, it's because it gives insights that work on their level. And I'll see a lot of data scientists come and be like, they like think they have to explain in the abstract the entire mathematics of the system to somebody who doesn't have that type of background. And that's just not effective. That's not effective communication. That's not what they need. What they need is, here's your problem. Here's what I learned about your problem. And then here's how I approach the project. And then here are the insights that help you along with your problem. And in my experience with these big societal issues with regular people, if your solution is an effective solution, if your solution is an effective economic solution, you could communicate that in that way. Like, here's the problem. We're seeing things become more expensive, or blah, yada, yada, whatever it is, such things that are very tangible to them. And then say, this is what I did, or this is how I thought about it in a way that makes sense to them in their world. This is what I did, and this is how this solution will be effective. Like, there can be types of science that get technical. Like, if this will address climate change, and maybe some of the details of how might get a little lost with the details of that science, that's fine. But you can still communicate it in a way that makes sense to their world. This was something I was thinking about with what you were saying. Like, with maybe the pick on, because you picked on Ezra Klein for this, but like to that kind of, I consider that like a type of technocratic approach of like, you have to support the technocrats. That type of messaging, in my experience, usually amounts to power. Then that's the only way to actually phrase it and communicate it. It's usually about, we should give these people power because they have the technical knowledge, and not effective communication. Or yeah, what are your thoughts?
That makes sense. Like, yeah, my whole thing is that I never liked how Ezra Klein talks down to people. But yeah, like your example of machine learning is great, because it's like you don't need to teach somebody how to do matrix multiplication to show them that like it's a thing that finds patterns. But and like, also I don't think that, if you can't explain I don't know, like super solids or something like that, then like you're just not communicating well enough. Like I can see that there are things that are genuinely complex that like don't have that thing, but to kind of get it on point, it's just that like I don't think that it's like this has not been communicated right. Or I mean, oftentimes there is that, but the fact is, like, the average person can actually understand quite a lot more than people think they can.
Right.
They have been deprived of a lot of the sort of tools to understand complicated things, but they can understand these things. Like, people aren't dumb, and I think that like that's one of the things, like one of the hurdles we really have to unlearn, because I do think that I'm not an anti-intellectual in like those, in that sense, but like I guess that's not what I'm saying, but I do think that like intellectual pursuits are something that everybody should be able to indulge in, not just those who are well off enough that they can go to fancy schools. I think that's the part like that I want. Like I think about how I think it was like a Noam Chomsky interview that I heard about this, but like the idea that like there was a time not long ago when like people who were like working in factories would do stuff like pay a kid to read like works of like philosophy and stuff like that on the floor, so that they could just listen along while they worked, because that kind of stuff was interesting, and like that was the like even in its most like like in a really skeezy being ruined by grifters way, like a lot of the like the manosphere influencers, if you like listen to the language that they try to use to explain their own nonsense, they try to talk about it in the context of intellectual pursuits. Like, I do think that on average, most people are interested in that kind of stuff. I actually do.
Yeah, this makes total sense. Yeah, I don't get the sense that you're anti-intellectual at all. I do get a bit, in this, I mean this in a positive way, I do get the sense that you're a bit almost anti-elitist. You're you need a stamp of paper to say that you engage with this stuff. To me, it's about talking to people with where they're at. Yeah, how have you approached that as somebody who creates content?
In my sense, luckily I'm in a field that is literally about the human experience and the humanities and stuff. Like, to kind of go back to the thing, I don't know how I would teach matrix multiplication in a way that would make things make sense, but I do know that in my field that people resonate with stories. People resonate with, apply, like there are a lot of universal experiences that you can tie things to attach things that might seem abstract or far off to their lives, their experiences, their feelings. And as long as you get like my main way that I've been trying to connect is to one, if there is an idea that hasn't been explained, because you'd have to read this, this, and this to try and unpack that and not leave anybody behind on that. And on top of that, just to try to make as many connections between the things that I'm talking about and their own lived experience that I can. And in my mind, like, people don't like being convinced. They don't like being like that. You're like, they like it when you're trying to like actively make a point at them. But if you just know enough to give to give the connections, to give the tools, and give them basically the material to think about and chew on their own to come to their own conclusions, that is enough. That is the way to do it.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I'm going to ask one final question. I guess speaking of
Sure.
about like, say you have a listener, whether they're college educated, wherever they're at in life, doesn't really matter. But they're curious and they want to learn more about some of the stuff that you've been talking about. Um, Obviously, maybe other than your YouTube channel, as an obvious answer, where
Mm-hmm.
would you recommend they go for something practical to try to kind of understand about some of the big dynamics in the United States you've been talking about?
Oh boy. Okay, so let's see. I think I have it around here somewhere.
Oh,
So
perfect.
the unfortunate thing is that if you want to understand how the world works, you kind of have to read this. This is Capital by Karl Marx. This is part one of a 3-book series, and as you can see, it is extremely long. Don't read this.
Yeah.
don't read this. Unless you hate yourself and want to intellectually torture yourself with actual math and stuff like that. Don't read that. I think that the best book that I recommend to people on, like, if you want like the beginning of how to understand it, is David Harvey is the author, and David Harvey is he's a professor who he teaches the course. He teaches the entire course you have to take just to understand this book at his school, and he has written a book called let me just find it for you because I read it a long time ago. I think it's called A Companion to Marx's Capital. A Companion to Marx's Capital. And then there is another book called A Companion to Marx's Capital, Volume 2. But if you read the first one, that is probably like one of the better like books to get started in understanding like if you really want to understand like how the world got to the way it is. If you want one that's a little bit more close to like with real world examples about stuff that's going on right now, he has another book called I think it's called like neoliberalism. So it's a book about a brief history of neoliberalism. It's a little old right now because it came out in 2005, so it's like 20 years old, but it does a really good job of explaining the sort of everything I talked about like the increasing inequalities and the breakdown of like the grand bargain and all that kind of stuff, and seeing the capitalist economic system as sort of a impersonal cybernetic organism that is just trying to maximize profit at the expense of everything. So like, honestly, I find like David Harvey is the best like person to get started on theory in a lot of ways. But also for if you don't want to read another book though, maybe we are actually maybe there's like actually like a whole, because I don't actually think I can think off the top of my head of like a really good YouTuber / like content creator who really gets into the juice of like, you know, historical materialism and Marx and stuff like that. But if you know one, please let me know.
I'm not either. I'm not immediately thinking of someone who does also someone who isn't just like a professor posting their lectures, like who like does it in an engaging, interesting way. I maybe Michael Burns, who used to be at Wisecrack and now, but I think he's kind of doing a slightly different focus, but it's kind of related. Um,
Oh, here, there's a really good one. There's a TikTok account that I was really a really big fan of, where he's like I think he's like a British podcaster, but he's made these like these TikTok videos where he does a viral TikTok dance followed by him explaining a little snippet about Marx. Um, it's great.
there you go.
That's very TikTok.
Yeah, I was like, that might be
Um,
one of the most TikTok things I've heard in a while.
yeah, I should find his account. It's here somewhere. Let me.
Well, let's do this for now. I'm gonna try to include all of these links in the description down below. Both the book and YouTube and TikTok, and also all the other sources we mentioned throughout the conversation. I mentioned the machine learning stuff. That's a whole other podcast, but like I had the podcast where I talked to different data scientists, including about how to break down complex concepts in a way to make sense for regular people. And I can link to some of that too. I've written articles about that, but that's aside. But like, I guess for now, thanks for taking the time to talk. And I hope you have a good rest of your evening where you don't have to deal with bedtime duties.
I think he's already asleep. But yeah, thank you. This is really nice. I haven't gotten to talk excitedly about Marxism in a while. So
Yeah,
yeah, this is a pleasure. Thank you, Stephen.
no problem.